Alright, so I'm pretty much going to pick up where we left off last time. This is one of the advantages of taking notes, because I probably wouldn't have remembered otherwise. Once again, a bit of a spoiler warning. I don't think we're going to be diving into as big of details or as deep into details of the story and that of the game, but still going a little bit into stuff people may want to keep a secret, including this first bit, which was, like I said before, I didn't feel like I had a lot to talk about with it, so I decided just to leave it. But then I realized if you're watching the gameplay, you may notice something. Being all of a sudden, all the emblems we've been collecting are gone. They have changed hands, and we will have to reobtain all of them. I guess maybe this isn't a huge spoiler, considering I believe one of the trailers did show someone else using Marth's ring. So yeah, I like that twist from a gameplay perspective, because that was one thing I was almost thinking that, I wonder how tough some of these rings would be to face if they're on the other side. And now we get to find out. One other thing I will say is that I kind of like how they had Lucina sort of take over Marth's role a little bit, because it just, for people familiar with Fire Emblem, that just makes perfect sense. It's just a nice little touch. That leaves us into chapter 13, I believe, which is kind of funny because I was just saying how chapter 12 was one of my favorites, and then chapter 13 was probably one of my least favorites. Not saying it was a bad map or anything, but it was a little, I guess, too gimmicky for my taste. Don't get me wrong, I like when they experiment with different scenarios, but I don't know, it felt like a little much because you had a bunch of areas blocked off by destructible environments, especially towards the middle of the map, and then half the map was like some sort of body of water or a lake or whatever that you couldn't really travel on, and it was also a second map where we had to deal with issues of lightness where you couldn't see everything. So I don't know, for me it just didn't really mesh as well as I would have thought. Even towards the end, I felt like I was missing a lot of the bonus spaces or whatever you want to call them, where you get rewards for placing a unit on them. And then I wound up essentially trapping the boss that was left to essentially keep damaging Boucheron, who's an armored unit now, who wouldn't take that much damage, so I can have other units circle around the map and get the rest of the bonus spaces. I feel like we were even circling around the middle of the map even before, though, just as time progressed and some of the units started to advance. I just sort of had to have my strategy be that way. What's kind of funny, though, is for as sort of pushing the gimmicks as Chapter 13 was, Chapter 14, I don't have much to say, but it was a fun map. But it wasn't really a gimmicky map. There's not really much to say. Like, I think I said about another map, it was just a good, typical Fire Emblem level, and nothing wrong with that. I wish I did have more to say, just because, like I said, I did enjoy that level more than the one I talked more about. This one in particular reminded me a bit. This was in Solm Palace, and this reminded me a bit of the Fierne Palace one, too, just sort of on a bigger scale. Chapter 15 was the last main mission I did, and what you'll see gameplay from. I liked this chapter. It was kind of interesting. It was kind of like they slowly unveiled the whole map to you, almost like sort of completing 3 or 4 mini maps, just because. And this is the way I strategize too. You can probably be a little more aggressive with it, but I would just sort of clear a room, open the door, clear the next room, and move on like that. There was also these new spaces which were a bit of a pain in the ass, because they gave you a bunch of debuffs and the enemy a bunch of buffs, and it made taking them on a lot more difficult. But it was fun to strategize around that. In this map, we were introduced to Seadoll, who is our dancer of this game. I like him. He's also a fortune teller, which I think is a really interesting. I feel like it could work really well with support conversations. Like I've already seen, I think one, but it just sort of revolves around people getting their fortunes and told them that. Obviously, I guess, but I don't know. I guess I could see it going some really interesting places. Emblem-wise, we unlocked Ike, who I really haven't used yet, so I don't have much to say on him. After that, we unlocked Byleth. From what I've seen, I think Byleth has a skill that which can help you gain experience a little faster. I think 1.2% as opposed to, the regular 1% growth is what I saw. And I think I haven't used it, but I thought it said that he had a almost, I don't know, skill similar to Leaf, where he may be able to sort of use a wide array of weapons to sort of combat the weapons triangle and the break system, which is pretty useful. After that, there was also Corrin, who I also haven't really used a lot. I will say Corrin does have a Dragon Vein ability, which, for the map we had introduced for Corrin, was pretty useful. I wonder how it'll progress, though. I was a little disappointed, because you're able to use the Dragon Vein to spawn ice and sort of get rid of some of the spaces I was talking about earlier, but you couldn't do that, I believe, to any, like, if an enemy was already there, you weren't able to, like, freeze them too or whatever. I don't know, I think that would have been a little interesting to maybe give them some sort of debuff or a little damage or something. Besides that, another big thing that's sort of been happening in my playthrough right now was I was reaching level 20 with a lot of characters, so it's time to promote. It's a bit more of a pain in the ass, though, this time, because I don't think that you could bring Master Seals with you and change in the middle of a battle, like in other games. So, first, in the last chapter I did, I was really trying to level up as much as I could of the units that were right there. And then I was messing around with Arena to see if I can get a couple of them over, but I wound up doing the Lucina Paralogue to sort of finish everyone off. It wound up working out really well, actually. There was just enough units to select for the mission to get the people I wanted leveled up so they can be promoted. And then there was just enough enemies and experience available to sort of, as efficiently as possible, gain the experience, get everyone to level 20, and not really waste a lot of experience having to go after units with some of my units that are already maxed out. The whole Paralogue thing, though, sort of made me remember in past Fire Emblem games, particularly Awakening and Fates, I would actually have a B team take on the Paralogue maps, because that was one thing I sort of noticed is, okay, if I start tackling some of these Paralogues, then I might be over-leveled compared to the story maps, and then that might make them a little too easy. But then if I don't do the Paralogues, when I go back to them, then I'm going to be over-leveled, and they're not going to be that fun either. So I've essentially just been going through all the units I have, looking who has a rating of 85 or above, or could get there if I used a Master Seal on them, even if they're not level 20, to try to put... I looked it up, and the most units you can equip during a Paralogue is 11. So I was able to find 11 units, actually 13 possible units, because I still have Fram, who can level up with the staff, and I still have Saline, who would have a unique class, as well as access to Thunder, which could be useful for sort of keeping her out of range. Although maybe I could sort of throw Seedall in with this group too, just because you don't gain as much experience through dancing. Oh yeah, the Dancer class this time is a body art, I think is what they call it now, brawler type weapon this time, which I think fits and makes it a little more unique. I know they've used swords a lot before, like a lot of other classes. So yeah, I'm probably going to do one more mission, because I looked it up, and the next mission I get sort of the last two, I think, characters that we knew before launch who are more associated with the main cast, I guess. I don't know if that's the way to put it, but I guess the way I sort of think about it is almost like in Awakening, right before you get Sayri, or in Fates, when you get the Lords, the Retainers, and like a couple of the other available units. But before you get units, like I said, Sayri, or like Scarlet and Reyna and Fates. But yeah, that would be Gold Mary and Rosado, so I'll see how I can sort of fit them in, and then I'll probably start taking on some of the Paralogues alongside the main missions. I have slowed down a bit, not because I'm not enjoying the game or anything, I just felt like it was about time. The maps are getting bigger in that, and I don't know, like I sort of said at the end of my last part, There's a few other games I would like to start spending a little time on as well, that I might even do one of these things for as well. So like I said, these might become a little more spread out, I guess. It just sort of depends on how I hit everything, but when I feel like I have enough to say and how long it takes to beat enough chapters to get to that point. Especially with the paralogs too. I don't know if the paralogs will really, they seem to be based off of previous maps and that, so that's cool, but I don't know if there's really a lot to say about that. But I guess we'll see. Like I said, I haven't played a lot of the other games, so maybe these maps will be interesting for the ones I'm not as familiar with. One other thing I guess I'll talk about is that I sort of figured out how to cheat the bond ring system, which I also kind of used in Arena, which I talked about earlier, is I figured out if you save and exit, you could sort of already know what's going to happen. Like in the case of the rings, it'll already be determined what character you'll get. Like there's characters 1 through 10, and there's, the C through S ring, and you'll always get the 7th character with the specific rank if you reload your save, so that way you can sort of pick and choose what rings you want based on whatever criteria you have. I'm just sort of trying to collect all the characters. And Arena, I think, was kind of similar too. I think you always sort of face the same unit, so you can maybe sort of plan that accordingly so you can build whatever supports you want, or maybe have a better shot of beating said unit and gaining experience. But that was just something I sort of learned through messing around that could be helpful. And yeah, this took, not that it took particularly long, but I'm still hoping. I have a bunch of notes here on the Somnial that I've been meaning to get back to, that I'm sort of hoping I have a part that I sort of talk about and it's like half as long, and then I can fill that other half with the Somnial stuff, but that just doesn't happen. I thought maybe this part, but yeah, it wound up being not quite that way, but yeah, someday we will get back to that.